I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The headlights cut through the dark highway like thin blades, but the road still felt endless. I'd been driving for hours, past sleepy towns, lonely gas stations, and winding roads, to get to what I thought was the most important evening of my daughter's life, her engagement dinner. I was exhausted. My back ached. My eyes burned. But I didn't care. I was a mother, and nothing, not my age, not the distance, not the late hour, was going to keep me from being there for her. When I finally pulled up to the restaurant, I could see the lights still on inside. I took a deep breath, adjusted my pale blue cardigan, and smoothed my hair in the mirror. At 82, my once bright blonde hair was more silver now, but I still tried to look presentable for special occasions. I'd brought a small gift too, a locket I'd worn since I was 21, with a picture of her as a baby inside. I stepped inside, my heart pounding with excitement. She turned when she saw me, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We had the dinner yesterday. With close family." Close family. The words hit me harder than any winter storm. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. But the way she shifted uncomfortably told me I hadn't. "Oh," I said softly, forcing my lips into a smile. That's fine." She started to explain something about schedules and how it just worked out better that way. But I barely heard a word. I nodded, clutching the locket in my palm until it dug into my skin. "All right, dear," I said finally, my voice steady even though my chest felt like it was caving in. "You enjoy the rest of your night." And I left. I didn't cry in the parking lot. I didn't shout. I didn't demand to know why I hadn't been considered close family. I just got back in my car, started the engine, and drove home through the cold darkness, my face lit only by the dashboard's pale glow. 3 days passed. I busied myself with my garden, with baking, with reading the same sentence in my book over and over without taking it in. I tried to ignore the gnawing pain in my chest. Then my phone rang. It was her. Her voice was high-pitched, frantic. "Mom, the credit card isn't going through. Did you forget to pay it?" I held the phone to my ear, closed my eyes, and let the silence stretch just long enough for her to squirm. Then I said calmly, "I warned you. Remember?" There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her heartbeat through the phone. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling now. I smiled to myself. She didn't know yet. And that was the beauty of it. 2 weeks before that so-called engagement dinner, I had been sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of chamomile tea, going over my monthly bills. At my age, money isn't just about paying for things, it's about security, peace of mind, and dignity. I've always been careful. I learned that from my parents, who survived the Great Depression eating cabbage soup 3 nights in a row and patching the same pair of socks until they fell apart in their hands. My daughter, on the other hand, was different. Madison grew up in a different America, one where credit cards were swiped without thinking and student loans didn't feel real until the bills came in the mail. I raised her with good values, or so I thought, but somewhere along the way she started treating money like a bottomless well. It started small, little emergencies. She'd call asking for help with rent, with a car repair, with an unexpected medical bill. I gave without hesitation. I was her mother after all. But over the last few years, her calls stopped being emergencies and started sounding more like demands. And those demands grew bigger. One afternoon she had called, voice sweet and warm, telling me about this dream engagement party she wanted to have. A private dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. I told her flat out, "Madison, if you're planning something so big, you'll have to manage it within reason. I'm not putting my name on anything I can't control." "Mom," she'd said in that condescending tone she used when she wanted to make me feel old-fashioned, "you've got the credit card. You never even use it. Why not just put it on there? It's not like you're strapped for cash." I'd taken a slow sip of my tea. "That card is in my name. Pay it. If you're not careful, you'll end up in a hole you can't climb out of." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Relax, Mom. I'll pay you back. You worry too much." I didn't argue, but before we hung up I'd told her, quietly but firmly, Madison, if you leave me out of something important, if you treat me like I'm disposable, I won't forget it. And I won't be there to bail you out next time. That was my warning. Fast forward to the night she left me standing in that restaurant, gift in hand, after I'd driven for hours. She didn't just leave me out, she humiliated me. And I'm sure in her mind, I'd be too soft-hearted to stay mad. She didn't know I'd already been making quiet changes in my finances. I'd called the credit card company weeks earlier, set a spending limit, and even given them a note to call me before approving anything over a certain amount. She thought she could spend without consequences. She thought wrong. After she hung up the phone that night, panic in her voice about the card not working, I sat back in my chair, staring out at my snow-covered backyard. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. 'Cause I knew. This was just the beginning. The thing about being 82 is people think you're harmless. Too old to fight back. But they forget one important truth. Old age doesn't make you weak. Makes you patient. And I had been patient for a long, long time. Mom, please, just this one time. Her voice came in short, panicked breaths, like she was running but getting nowhere. I had the phone on speaker while I folded warm laundry on the kitchen table. The smell of clean cotton made me feel steady, even as her words tried to knock me off balance. I told the restaurant you'd cover it, Madison rushed on. It's only the deposit and then the rest later. They're saying the card declined and the manager is being a jerk. I picked up a towel and folded it in 2 neat squares. Madison, I warned you, I said again quietly. I told you not to put my name on anything you can't pay for. You're really doing this to me right now, she snapped, the panic switching to anger like a light flipping on. You drove all the way here to make me feel bad. And now you're going to leave me hanging when I need you most? You know how embarrassing this is. I breathed in, breathed out. The towel went into the drawer, perfectly aligned. Embarrassing, I echoed. Yes, I know something about that. Silence. Then a little hiss through her teeth. She understood what I meant. The restaurant, the locket burning in my palm, the words close family, still hanging in the air like fog that wouldn't lift. I can't talk about that right now, she said, her voice brittle. The manager needs an answer in 10 minutes. Tyler's with me and he's freaking out because the invitations already have the date. Tyler can call his parents, I said calmly. Or he can call the restaurant and give them his card. He's a grown man. His credit line is maxed because of... She stopped. Never mind. Can you please just approve it? I'll pay you back. I walked to the window and looked out over the yard. The snow was beginning to crust over, sparkling under a weak sun. A red cardinal hopped on the fence, cocking its head at me like he was waiting for me to toss him a crumb. The bank will call me if the charge is over 500, I said. And I'll say no. Mom. The word came out with a crack. You're being cruel. I'm being clear, I said. Madison, I love you. But I'm not your emergency fund anymore. The line went quiet. I imagined her staring at her phone, trying to decide whether to cry or to scream. She used to be so good at both when she was a little girl. When she fell and scraped her knee, she'd climb into my lap and hide her face in my sweater, hot tears soaking through the wool. I'd kiss her hair and tell her it would be all right. And it usually was. But this was not a scraped knee. This was a cliff she kept running toward with her eyes closed. Fine, she said finally, frost creeping into her tone. You're making your choice. Don't be surprised when I make mine. She hung up. I stood in the quiet house, listening to the heater kick on and the clock in the hallway tick-tick-tick like a slow metronome. My reflection in the window looked older today, softer around the jaw, hair that used to be lemon sun blonde now a gentle, stubborn silver. But my eyes, pale and steady, were the same ones that got me through nursing school when I was 20, and through night shifts when my husband got sick, and through 1,000 worry-filled mornings when I didn't know how the day would end. The landline rang. This is Mary Caldwell, a warm, businesslike voice said. Manager at Willow and Birch. Your card is on file for the Caldwell engagement dinner, but we're having some trouble processing it. Would you be able to give me verbal authorization for the deposit? It's $6,200. A smile touched my lips. Ms. Caldwell, that card cannot be used without my authorization. And you won't be getting it. Mary hesitated. I understand. Should I speak with your daughter and her fiancé? You should send them their own invoice, I said, still polite. And you should remove my name from anything they've put it on. We'll need a signature for that. I'll stop by this afternoon, I said. When I hung up, I let my hand rest on the countertop. The granite was chilled, grounding. I thought of all the little ways I'd been drawn into Madison's messes. Tiny threads at first, then ropes pulling tight. The cell phone plan in my name for a month or two, that turned into 3 years. The car insurance I added her to because she said the new rate was ridiculous. The emergency dentist bill that somehow turned into a spa weekend receipt 6 days later. In the weeks before the dinner, I had made calls that felt like setting bones straight. One to the bank to put a hard limit on the card. One to the phone carrier to split her line from mine at the end of the billing cycle. One to the insurance to remove her as a driver in 30 days unless she provided her own policy. Grandma paperwork, I joked to myself as I checked things off. The quiet kind of revenge. Not revenge exactly. Boundaries. A word my church friend Martha had taught me over tea and lemon cookies. Boundaries are kindness in advance, she liked to say. You tell folks where the fence is before they drive their truck through your living room. By lunchtime I'd put on my long wool coat and my favorite pink lipstick, the one my neighbor said made me look bright. At Willow and Birch, the manager recognized me from a charity luncheon years back. You're Madison's mother, she said carefully, as if the title might explode on contact. Yes, I said and didn't add the rest. We handled the paperwork. She apologized for the miscommunication, and I nodded to show I wouldn't be making a scene. I never like scenes. People say quiet folks are pushovers. They don't know the power of a signature on the right line. When I stepped back into the winter light, a car rolled to the curb so quickly it splashed slush onto my shoes. The passenger door flew open and Madison jumped out, her cheeks blotchy and damp. Tyler got out slower, jaw set, eyes sliding away from mine. Are you happy now? She said. You embarrassed me. They said you refused. In front of everyone. I said no, I replied. That isn't the same thing. Tyler stepped closer, trying on a smile that didn't fit his face. Mrs. Connor. Caldwell, I corrected. I kept my name. Right, he said. Look, this is just a pinch. I had some unexpected charges and the timing got weird. We'll square up after the wedding. It's really important that we keep this date. Important to you, I said. But not important enough to invite me. Madison rolled her eyes. Oh my gosh. Are we really doing this again? It was a small dinner. Close family, like I said. And I'm not that, I said gently. She flinched. For the first time, a shadow of doubt crossed her face. Mom, it wasn't like that. You know how you get in crowds. I didn't want you to feel overwhelmed. You didn't want me to see how much it cost, I said. Because you planned to use my card. Tyler looked away. Madison's throat moved as she swallowed. Can we just fix it? Please. Her voice found that child edge, the one that used to melt me. I wished for a second that we could go backward together. Back to her first piano recital, where her hands shook and I squeezed her shoulder and whispered, You've already done the hard part. The playing is the easy bit. Back to the lemonade stand she made with a cardboard sign and a crooked smile, counting quarters into my palm and bragging. We're rich now, Mommy. Back to any moment where love and money weren't braided into a rope that kept tightening around both of our throats. But the world only spins one way. No, I said. Tyler muttered something under his breath that I won't repeat. He turned and kicked the tire of his car like it had insulted him. Madison stared at me, eyes shining with angry tears. You're choosing to ruin this for me, she said. I'm choosing not to pay for it, I said. There's a difference. She sucked in a breath, as if she might say something cruel. Then she closed her mouth, climbed back into the car, and slammed the door hard enough to make me blink. Tyler shot me a look like a promise. They drove off with a squeal that made the manager inside glance toward the window and frown. At home I made soup and didn't taste it. I prayed without words, just a leaning of my tired bones against something bigger than me. By late afternoon my cell buzzed with alerts. 3 declined charges, 1 attempted cash advance, 1 online application for a retail card I'd never heard of. I called the bank and the nice man said, "You're doing everything right, ma'am. We'll put extra monitoring on the account." "Thank you," I said. Meant it. Dusk, the doorbell rang. Martha stood there, bundled in a parka, cheeks rosy as an apple. "Heard the engagement fireworks across town," she said dryly. "Figured you could use company." We sat at the table with peppermints and hot water bottles on our knees like 2 old hens waiting out a storm. I told her the facts and left out the parts that would make my voice crack. "You're not cruel," she said when I finished. "You're clean. Big difference." "I keep thinking about the warning," I murmured. I told her I wouldn't forget if she treated me like I was disposable. And I meant it. But meaning it hurts. "Kindness in advance," Martha reminded me, patting my hand. "Boundaries keep you from resenting the people you love. And honey, you love that girl." I nodded because that was the truest thing in the room. A 9, my cell vibrated again. I glanced down, expecting another fraud alert. Instead, a text from an unknown number. "Are you available to confirm a new line of credit, Mrs. Caldwell? Reply yes to speak to an agent now." My stomach went cold. I replied yes and picked up when the phone rang. "Hello, this is Evan with First Union. We have an application for a $15,000 line of credit under your name. We just need to verify your monthly income and your social security." My voice came out steady. "I did not submit that application." Paper rustling. "Understood, ma'am. The application appears to have been filled out from a device already associated with your online banking profile." The room seemed to tilt. "Meaning? Someone with access to your device or your login likely initiated it." I thought of the weekend last year when Madison asked to check my emails for a doctor's message while I mixed frosting for her birthday cake. How she'd sat at my desk, quick fingers dancing, telling me about a podcast while I piped little pink rosettes on vanilla cupcakes. "Please flag it as fraud," I said. "We will," Evan said. "And for your safety, I recommend freezing your credit and filing a local report. If this is a family matter, I know that can be sensitive." I thanked him, hung up, and sat very still. Martha didn't speak. She just slid the hot water bottle deeper under my palms until the heat reached my bones. The doorbell rang again. Not a neighborly ring. A long, insistent buzz that seemed to press against the house itself. Martha and I traded a look. She stood. "Want me to get it?" "I'll go," I said and pushed to my feet. At the door I peered through the peephole. Blue and red lights pulsed across the snow, painting it in flashing stripes. A police cruiser idled at the curb. 2 officers on the porch, hats low, breath blooming in the cold. My heart thudded once, heavy and alive. I unlocked the deadbolt, opened the door. "Officers," I said, voice even. "Is everything all right?" The taller one nodded. "Evening, ma'am. We received a report of possible financial exploitation of an adult. The report lists you as the alleged offender." In the distance, down at the end of my driveway, a small, familiar shape shifted in the shadows. Someone was there watching. A figure in a white coat, arms hugged tight around herself, phone glowing at her ear. "Name on the report," the officer continued, reading from his pad. "Madison Caldwell." I didn't turn to Martha. I didn't blink. I just kept my eyes on the little figure at the end of the drive as the snow started falling again, slow and soft like ash. "Ma'am," the officer said gently, "would you mind if we came in and asked a few questions?" I stepped back from the door to let them pass, my mouth dry as paper, because I knew 2 things at once. I had done nothing wrong, and my own daughter had just called the police on me. The click of their boots on my hardwood floor echoed far louder than it should have. Martha stood near the kitchen doorway, her hands folded, eyes sharp but calm. I motioned toward the table. "Please have a seat," I said, my voice as even as I could make it. The taller officer, whose badge read Sergeant Hill, sat down first. The younger one, with a boyish face barely touched by stubble, stood off to the side, holding a small notepad. "We understand this is a delicate matter," Sergeant Hill began. "But we have to follow up on any report of possible financial exploitation, especially when it involves family members." I folded my hands on the table. "And what exactly did my daughter claim?" He glanced at his notes. "That you intentionally restricted her access to funds that were promised for her wedding expenses, in retaliation for a personal disagreement. She also alleged that you've interfered with her credit, causing damage to her financial standing." I let that sit for a moment, the words hanging in the air like frost. "She told you that?" "Yes, ma'am." Martha's voice came from behind me, calm and edged with steel. "And I suppose she didn't mention that the so-called promised funds were in her mother's name? That she's been using that credit for years without paying it off?" The younger officer looked a little uncomfortable. "We're not here to take sides, ma'am. We're just gathering information." I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out a neat stack of papers, my just-in-case file. I'd kept it for years, updating it every few months. It had everything: bank statements, credit card terms, the signed agreement from when Madison first asked to be an authorized user, and every email warning her about overspending. Sliding the stack toward Sergeant Hill, I said, "Every charge, every late payment, every time I've covered her bills is right there. I've also included the letter from my bank, confirming I put a spending cap on the card 3 weeks ago." He took the papers, flipping through them. His brow furrowed deeper the further he went. "Ma'am," he said finally, "from what I'm seeing here, this looks more like you're protecting yourself than exploiting anyone." "I am protecting myself," I said quietly. "From my own child." The younger officer cleared his throat. "Would you like to press a counterclaim for attempted fraud? The application for that $15,000 line of credit. It's been flagged." Pause. The word fraud hung heavy between us. "I'm not ready to answer that yet," I said. "But I would like it on record that I did not authorize any wedding expenses, nor did I agree to be financially responsible for them." Sergeant Hill nodded. "We'll make that clear in our report." From the window, I could still see the small white-coated figure at the end of the driveway. Madison hadn't moved. She was pacing now, head down, phone still pressed to her ear. She looked small, but not sorry. "Can I ask," the younger officer said, "was there something that happened recently between you two? Something that might explain why she'd leave me out of her engagement dinner?" Cut in. "Yes, there was. And so I told them. Not with bitterness but with facts. A drive. Closed door." The words "close family" thrown at me like a casual insult. When I finished, Sergeant Hill sighed. "Family disputes can be some of the nastiest cases we see. We'll file the report. You might get a call from the prosecutor's office, but from where I'm sitting, there's no evidence of a crime on your part." They stood, thanking me for my time, and headed for the door. But before they left, Sergeant Hill turned back. "Ma'am, I've seen situations like this get worse before they get better. Might be wise to keep an eye on your accounts and your property." I watched them walk out into the night, their boots crunching over the fresh snow. Madison didn't approach them. She turned away, climbing into the passenger seat of a dark SUV I didn't recognize. The taillights glowed red before disappearing into the dark. I closed the door, the silence of the house rushing back in. Martha spoke first. "She's escalating." He nodded. "I know." My tea had gone cold, but I drank it anyway, the bitter taste sharp on my tongue. I knew now that this wasn't about one dinner or one credit card. Madison had crossed into a place where love didn't guide her decisions anymore. Entitlement did. And if she thought calling the police was the end of my patience, she didn't know me at all. 'Cause now I was done playing defense. I was going to take control of the game. And the first move was already in motion. The next morning the house was still. No phone calls, no police at the door, no Martha knocking with a tin of scones and a raised eyebrow. Just me, my oatmeal, and the clock ticking in the hallway. It would have been easy to convince myself the storm had passed. That Madison had made her point, failed, and would now lick her wounds quietly until she needed something again. But I knew my daughter. Quiet from her meant only one thing: she was planning. I rinsed my bowl, dried it, and walked to the small cedar chest in my bedroom. Inside, under neatly folded linens, was a leather-bound folder. It held the deed to my home, my will, my pension account details, and a thin but powerful document that had been my ace in the hole for years: the family trust. When my husband, Thomas, passed 22 years ago, I'd been cautious. He'd left me with more than enough to live comfortably, between his insurance payout, the savings, and our investments. But I'd watched too many friends have their assets drained by well-meaning but reckless relatives. So I'd set up a trust. The terms were ironclad. Only I could make changes while alive. Upon my death, the trustee, Martha, would execute everything exactly as written. And Madison. She wasn't the sole beneficiary. She wasn't even the primary. The lion's share was set aside for my grandson Liam, her son. The one bright thing Madison had ever brought into my life before she started making choices that dimmed my respect for her. She didn't know the details. She only knew I had money put away, and that she was in the will. That ignorance had been a choice on my part. But now I was done letting her float in that comfortable not knowing. I picked up the phone and called Martha. "You sound sharper than yesterday," she said. "That's either good or dangerous." "Both," I replied. "I want to adjust the trust, not to punish Madison." "Sure," Martha said, her tone making it clear she knew better. "But to make sure she understands I'm serious. She's going to see in black and white that she is not entitled to anything just because she's my daughter. You want her to know before I'm gone," I said. "Before she makes the mistake of thinking my death would solve her problems." By noon we were at my lawyer's office. I'd worn my best navy coat, hair combed neatly, lipstick just enough to make me feel presentable. Madison always thought my little grooming rituals were old-fashioned, called them armor. We spent an hour reviewing the trust, making subtle adjustments to tighten restrictions. Any payout to Madison would now be tied to proof of stable employment and a clean financial history. No bankruptcies, no outstanding loans in default. Liam's share was increased. A small sum was added to a scholarship fund in my name. When the ink dried, my lawyer slid the folder toward me. "You understand this will cause tension." "I understand," I said. "That's the point." That evening, I scanned the relevant pages and sent them in an email to Madison with a short note. "Madison, I've updated my financial arrangements. You should review the attached documents carefully. Love." Took less than 5 minutes for my phone to light up. She didn't bother with hello. "What is this? Are you cutting me out? Are you seriously doing this just because I didn't invite you to one stupid dinner?" "This isn't about the dinner," I said. "This is about a pattern. Very long pattern. And I'm not cutting you out. I'm making sure you understand there are expectations attached to what I've worked for." "You're trying to control me," she snapped. "No," I said calmly. "I'm making sure my money doesn't get thrown away. If you meet the terms, you'll get your share. If you don't, you won't. It's as simple as that." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "You're going to regret this." I almost smiled. "We'll see." She hung up. I set the phone down and exhaled. My hands didn't shake. My heartbeat didn't race. For the first time in months, I felt like I was the one steering the ship. But that night, as I washed up for bed, a light swept across my bedroom wall. Headlights moving slowly down the street. They paused outside my house. The engine idled. I went to the window, parting the curtain just enough to see. Dark SUV. The same one from the night the police came. The driver's window rolled down. Phone glowed inside. A face illuminated for just a second. Not Madison's. A man's. Early 40s, maybe. I didn't recognize him. He sat there for a full minute before rolling up the window and driving away. And in that quiet moment I realized Madison wasn't just angry. She had help. And whatever they were planning next, it was already in motion. The next morning I woke before the sun. Not from my usual 5 a.m. habit, but from that restless, heavy kind of sleep that keeps your ears alert even when your eyes are closed. The image of that man's face in the SUV kept replaying in my head like an unfinished sentence. I made my coffee stronger than usual and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. I've always been a list maker, grocery lists, to-do lists, even lists of old songs I want to hear again before I go. That morning my list wasn't about chores. It was about names, dates, and strange coincidences. I wrote, Madison plus Tyler engaged. SUV man unknown. Seen twice. Police call from Madison. $15,000 fraudulent credit application flagged. Engagement dinner, close family. Timeline, card declined, police visit SUV. The more I wrote, the more my stomach tightened. This wasn't just Madison being petty or impulsive. There was structure here. Pressure points. Someone had walked her through how to make it look like I was the problem. By 9 a.m. I was on the phone with my bank's fraud department. Is there any way to tell if someone's been trying to access my accounts in person, not online? Yes. The woman on the line lowered her voice. Yes, ma'am. And actually, I was going to call you today. We had someone come into a branch yesterday afternoon claiming to be your financial power of attorney. He had your name, address, even your social security number. My grip on the phone tightened. And did he? No, ma'am. There's no power of attorney on file. Our staff followed procedure and denied access. But it was unsettling. Can you describe him? Yes. Tall, dark hair, maybe early 40s. Said his name was Daniel Shaw. Clicked immediately. SUV man. Did he say who sent him? The banker hesitated. He said he was acting on behalf of the family to prevent further harm. My jaw clenched. I see. Thank you for protecting my account. Please flag it. And if he comes back, I want a call immediately. When I hung up, I sat very still. The house seemed to hum around me, the refrigerator's low buzz and the faint tick of the clock sounding sharper than usual. Madison hadn't just found help. She'd found someone willing to legally maneuver around me. Someone who knew how to speak the right words to banks and police. And if they were willing to try the power of attorney trick, they'd try other angles too. I wasn't going to wait for the next move. By noon, I was at the county clerk's office filing a formal notice that no one, not even Madison, was to be granted power of attorney without my personal appearance. I also added an alert to my deed, so no transfer could be processed without my signature in person. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with a neat bob haircut, glanced over her glasses. You've had someone sniffing around. You could say that, I replied. That night, Martha came over with a pot roast. You've got that look again, she said, setting it down. What look? The look you had when your neighbor tried to plant his tomatoes on your side of the fence in '04. Quiet, polite, and 2 seconds from war. I told her about Daniel Shaw. About the bank. About the attempted power of attorney. She chewed a piece of carrot slowly, then swallowed. That's not just some boyfriend's friend. That's a man who knows paperwork. I know, I said. Which means he's dangerous in a way I can't see coming yet. We were clearing the dishes when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Enjoying your little fortress. It won't last forever. My hand stilled on the dish towel. No name. No emoji. Just the kind of message that makes the room feel colder, even with the oven still warm. I showed it to Martha. She frowned. We should take this to the police. And tell them what? That I got a creepy text. They'll log it and forget it. Then we don't wait, she said. We get ahead. I didn't sleep much that night. Around 2 a.m. I got up, wrapped myself in a blanket, and sat by the front window. The street was empty, just the halo of the lamppost pooling on the snow. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. By dawn I'd made my decision. If Madison and her new friend wanted a war over my life and my legacy, I was going to make sure they never got close enough to touch either. And I knew exactly who to call to start it. By sunrise, the snow outside glowed pale blue, and my mind was already racing through names. I didn't need someone who would just offer sympathy. I needed someone who knew how to fight quietly, effectively, and with the kind of precision that wouldn't leave Madison or her shadowy friend any room to wriggle free. And then I thought of him. Harold Benton. We'd worked together back when I was a surgical nurse at St. Joseph's. While I stitched wounds and monitored vitals, Harold worked in the hospital's risk management department. His job wasn't glamorous, but it was important, protecting the hospital from lawsuits, fraud, and opportunists who thought they could exploit a weak link in the system. Harold had been the one to tell me, never just lock the front door, bolt the back ones too. After we both retired, I'd only seen him at the occasional church fundraiser, but I knew this much. If someone was trying to legally maneuver me out of my own assets, Harold would know the countermove before they even finished filling out the paperwork. I dialed his number, half expecting it to be disconnected after all these years. "Mary." His voice was gravelly but warm. "Well, I'll be. What brings you to call me at this hour?" "Trouble," I said simply. "The kind that wears a nice coat and knows how to talk to a bank manager." An hour later, Harold was sitting in my living room, sipping black coffee and listening without interrupting as I laid out every detail. The dinner, the credit card, the police, the man in the SUV, the bank visit, the power of attorney attempt, and the text. When I finished, he leaned back and whistled low. "Your Madison's got herself a snake. And that snake's testing every fence you've got to see where it's weakest." "I've reinforced what I can," I said. "But I know they'll find another angle." "Oh, they will," Harold said. "They'll try elder guardianship next." The word landed heavy in the room. "Guardianship?" He nodded. "It's one step beyond power of attorney. If they can convince a judge you're not competent to handle your own affairs, they can take over everything. House, accounts, medical decisions, you name it." I felt a slow heat rising in my chest. Not fear, but something sharper. "And how do we stop that?" Harold's eyes crinkled. "We don't just stop it. We make it so anyone who tries looks like a fool before they even walk into court." By the time he left, I had a checklist in hand. Full medical evaluation proving mental competence. Updated will and trust with airtight legal language. Written statements from friends, neighbors, and my pastor confirming my independence. Security cameras around the property. Digital monitoring on all financial accounts with alerts for any inquiries. It was a lot, but it was doable. That afternoon I booked a full checkup with my doctor. "Just routine," I told the receptionist. "I want it all in writing." The next day I went to the electronics store for cameras. As the young salesman was walking me through the models, I noticed a man by the entrance. Tall, dark hair, wearing a charcoal overcoat. Daniel Shaw. He was pretending to browse phone cases, but his eyes kept flicking toward me. I met his gaze and held it, just long enough for him to know I'd seen him. Then I turned my back and continued the purchase as if he were nothing more than a shadow. When I left the store, the SUV was parked 2 rows away. Engine running. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to Martha's and parked in her driveway for an hour, sipping tea and chatting about nothing. If Daniel wanted to tail me, he could waste his gas. That evening I checked the first of the new camera feeds on my phone. Crisp, clear images of my porch, my driveway, and both side gates. At 11:43 p.m., a notification pinged. Motion detected. Front gate. I tapped the screen. There he was, Daniel Shaw, standing at my gate, looking straight into the camera, a faint smile on his face. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slid it through the bars. I waited until morning to retrieve it. In neat block letters it read, "This can end quietly. Call Madison." No threats, no demands, just a sentence. But I knew enough about predators to understand. Quiet doesn't mean safe. It means they're still circling. And I had no intention of letting them close in any further. Because Harold and I had already decided, the next move would be mine. And it would be loud enough to make sure they never mistook my silence for surrender again. The morning after Daniel Shaw's little midnight delivery, I woke up with my plan already crystallized. Harold's checklist lay on my kitchen counter, but this wasn't going to be just about protecting myself anymore. It was about hitting back in a way Madison and her friend couldn't ignore. I wasn't going to meet their games with whispers. I was going to take away the one thing they couldn't fake: credibility. By 9 a.m. I was at the office of Jenkins, Price & Harrow, the oldest law firm in town. Harold had made the appointment for me, which meant we were skipping the wait 2 weeks for an opening nonsense. Mr. Price himself, gray hair, tailored suit, the kind of voice that could silence a room, was waiting with a fresh pot of coffee and an open file. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, "Harold tells me you've got people circling." "That's one word for it," I said, sliding Daniel's note across the desk. "They're trying to get control over my accounts, maybe even guardianship." Mr. Price read it, then set it aside. "We'll cut that off at the knees." In the next 2 hours, we set in motion a string of legal maneuvers that would make Madison's head spin. Voluntary competency declaration filed with the court, backed by a full medical evaluation scheduled for the following week. Protective injunction on all my assets, requiring my direct presence for any changes. Revocation of Madison's access to anything with my name on it, utilities, subscriptions, even the family Netflix account. And the piece de resistance: a public notice in the local paper stating that I was of sound mind, in control of my affairs, and that no third party had any right to act on my behalf. "That last part is going to ruffle feathers," Mr. Price warned, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Good," I said. "I want them ruffled." By lunchtime, Harold met me at the diner down the street. "You've got the fire back," he said, sliding into the booth. "I haven't seen that look since you went after the city council for cutting library funding in '99. We laughed, but it was a short laugh. I could feel the clock ticking. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to retreat when challenged. He'd push harder. Sure enough, that evening the first ripple hit. Madison called, not with the high, frantic tone from before, but with a slow, deliberate voice that told me she was on speaker. "Mom, you really had to put that in the paper," she said. "I thought you'd want the whole town to know I'm doing just fine," I replied. A male voice, Daniel's, cut in. "Mrs. Caldwell, this is Daniel Shaw. I think you misunderstand our intentions." "I don't misunderstand anything," I interrupted. "I see exactly what you're trying to do. And you're not going to get it." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle from Daniel. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. You don't want this to go to court." "I'd love for this to go to court," I said, my voice steady. "Because then we can talk about fraud charges. And police reports. And that little visit you made to my bank, pretending to be my power of attorney." Silence. "Yeah," I said into the quiet. "They told me, Daniel. And there are cameras there too." Madison's voice returned, sharper now. "You're going to regret this, Mom." I smiled, even though they couldn't see it. "No, sweetheart. You are." I hung up before they could reply. That night, I moved my car into Martha's garage and turned off all the lights in my house. From the front yard it would look empty. And just after midnight, one of my new security cameras caught exactly what I expected. Daniel's SUV pulling up, parking across the street, and sitting there for 30 full minutes. But this time he wasn't just watching. When I checked the morning footage, I saw him get out, walk up my driveway, and kneel by my front door. He placed something small on the mat, glanced once at the camera, and left. I put on my gloves before opening the door. It was a single gold-colored key. And attached to it, a note. "Everything has a lock. And every lock has a key." I closed the door, holding the key in my palm, feeling its cold weight. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. Daniel Shaw was telling me he thought he'd found a way in. Which meant it was time to set the trap Harold and I had been planning. One that would make him step right into the open, with Madison standing beside him. And when they did, They wouldn't be able to talk their way out of what came next. By the next morning, the key was sitting in a sealed evidence bag on my kitchen counter. Harold had picked it up on his way over, holding it like it was a live grenade. "This isn't just creepy," he said, examining the note. "It's a message. He's telling you he thinks he's got a way in, physically or legally." "Then we give him one," I replied, my voice low but steady. "On our terms." Harold's eyes met mine, and a slow smile spread across his face. "You're thinking sting operation." "Exactly," I said. "We dangle bait. Something so tempting that he and Madison won't be able to resist, but that locks them in so tight they can't claim it was an accident." The bait came in the form of a manila envelope. Inside, fake updated trust documents that looked real enough to pass a casual glance. They were drafted with the help of Mr. Price, stamped with his firm's seal, but every word clearly marked in the hidden watermark as void sample. The documents named Madison as the sole beneficiary, with immediate transfer rights upon my signing. In short, they looked like a golden ticket. All they had to do was get my signature. We placed the envelope in my unlocked desk drawer, right next to a pen. The cameras in my study were adjusted for full view of the drawer. The trick was making sure Madison knew about it. That part was easy. I called her, voice carefully casual. "I've been thinking," I told her. "Maybe I was too harsh. There's something in my desk you might want to see. I'll be at Martha's this afternoon if you feel like stopping by." She didn't answer right away. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "Your desk?" "Yes," I said. "Top right drawer." An hour later, Harold was parked down the street in his sedan, watching my front door through binoculars. I sat at Martha's, sipping tea and pretending to read, my phone face up on the table. At 3:17 p.m., Harold called. "They're here." Through the live camera feed on my phone, I saw Madison let herself in with a spare key she wasn't supposed to have anymore. Daniel followed, closing the door behind him. They went straight to the study. Madison opened the drawer without hesitation. Daniel pulled on gloves, lifted the envelope, and flipped through the papers. Even from the camera angle, I could see the moment his posture changed. His head tilted slightly, and he tapped the page with his finger. "This is it," he mouthed to Madison. And then, the magic moment. Daniel set the papers down on the desk, took out a pen, and forged my signature. Madison stood beside him, watching closely. Her arms folded like this was the most natural thing in the world. The camera caught everything, clear as daylight. By the time they left, Harold had already called Mr. Price, who in turn called a contact at the sheriff's office. We didn't want to confront them at the house. We wanted this on record, officially and undeniably. 2 hours later, as Martha and I sat in my kitchen, headlights swept across the snow outside. 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled up, and I knew the next phase had begun. When I opened the door, Sheriff Collins, a broad man with a calm, serious face, stepped in. "Mrs. Caldwell, we've reviewed the footage you provided. It's more than enough to proceed. Do you want to press charges for attempted fraud and forgery?" My mouth was dry, but my voice was steady. "Yes, I do." He nodded. "We'll be picking them up tonight." At 9:42 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won. This isn't over. No name." But I didn't need one. Because 5 minutes later, another text came through, this time from Martha, who'd been watching the late news. "Turn on Channel 7. I did. There they were, Madison and Daniel, being led out of a townhouse in handcuffs, faces pale and tight under the harsh camera lights. The news anchor's voice was crisp. "Local woman and accomplice arrested in connection with an alleged fraud scheme targeting an elderly relative. Charges include attempted forgery and identity fraud." I sat back in my chair, hands wrapped around my mug. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't even triumph. It was release. But even as I watched them disappear into the back of the sheriff's vehicle, I knew this wasn't the final chapter. People like Daniel didn't fade quietly. And Madison, well, she had my blood in her veins. If she decided to fight, The next round could get even uglier. And I'd be ready. I thought the arrests would end it. For 2 blissful days, the street outside my house was quiet. No strange cars idling at night, no cryptic notes, no calls from Madison. I started sleeping again, even found myself humming in the kitchen while making coffee. But quiet, I've learned, is never the end. It's the inhale before the scream. On the 3rd morning, I woke to the sound of my landline ringing. Martha never calls before 7 a.m., so I knew it wasn't her. When I picked up, a clipped female voice said, "Mrs. Caldwell, this is reporter Elaine Norris with Channel 5 News. We'd like to offer you the chance to comment on your daughter's public statement." My daughter's what? Her public statement regarding the alleged incident, Elaine continued. It's been circulating since last night. I hung up and turned on the television. There she was, Madison, on the courthouse steps, hair perfectly curled, wearing a modest navy coat that made her look almost respectable. Daniel was nowhere in sight, but I could tell his fingerprints were all over the scene. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "My mother is 82 years old," Madison said, her voice trembling just enough to seem authentic. "She's been manipulated by people who don't have her best interests at heart. She's confused, she's paranoid, and she's being used to attack her own family. This is a tragedy, not a crime." The reporters lapped it up. She even dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I stood in my living room, watching her turn me into a frail, confused villain. And she was clever. She never outright accused me of incompetence, but the implication was clear. She was trying to plant the seed for guardianship again, this time in the court of public opinion. By noon, I had 3 voicemails from acquaintances. "Mary dear, I just saw the news. Are you all right? Do you need me to bring you groceries? I can help you sort things out. Sweetheart, if you need a place to stay while this blows over." It was working. People were starting to believe her version. That's when Harold called. "We're not playing defense anymore," he said. "You need to hit back. Publicly." That afternoon we called Elaine Norris, the same reporter who'd reached out to me, and invited her to my home. I didn't try to look younger or sweeter. I wore my glasses, my silver hair pulled back, and my best cardigan. But on the table in front of me, I placed the laptop open to the video footage from my study. When the camera crew arrived, I sat straight and told my story, not with anger but with precision. I spoke about the years of financial help that turned into entitlement. I explained the legal safeguards I'd put in place. And then I played the footage, clear as daylight, of Madison and Daniel in my home, rifling through my desk and forging my signature. Elaine's eyebrows shot up. "You have this on record?" "Yes," I said. "And it's already with the sheriff's department." By the 6 o'clock broadcast, my segment aired directly after Madison's tearful plea. The split screen was brutal. On one side, her claiming to protect me. On the other, her caught red-handed with Daniel, the pen in his hand hovering over my name. The calls that came in after that weren't offers of pity. They were apologies. "Mary, I can't believe she'd do that to you. We're with you, dear. If you need someone to testify to your state of mind, I'll do it." 2 days later, Madison called me from a blocked number. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice low and tight. "I'm not happy," I replied. "But I am safe. And that matters more. You've ruined my life." "No, Madison. You tried to ruin mine. The difference is I was ready." She didn't speak again before hanging up. That night I sat by the window, watching snow drift down under the lamplight. The fight was over. Not because she forgave me or I forgave her, but because I'd built walls she couldn't scale. I knew she might circle back someday. People like Madison don't like to lose. But when she did, she'd find the gates locked, the paperwork airtight, and her mother still sitting here, silver hair gleaming in the lamplight, holding the line. And if she wondered why I'd gone to such lengths, she'd never have to guess. I warned her. And I never give warnings I don't mean. If this story kept you hooked and reminded you that quiet strength can outsmart even the boldest betrayal, don't just scroll away. like, share, and subscribe for more gripping true-to-life dramas. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place?